Well, today I'm with my friend Hojjat Jafarpour. He's the CEO and co-founder of Deltastream. And Deltastream recently launched Deltastream Fusion, which unifies streaming and batch analytics workloads into a single serverless analytics platform. So you can go from raw data to actionable real-time insights with ease. So Hojjat, it's great to have you today.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So first, can you talk about a little bit about your background and the product that you created while you were at Confluent, and then how you came into Deltastream?
Yeah, it goes back to 2016. I was an early engineer at Confluent and I joined to build a stream processing platform. At that time, Confluent's main product was Apache Kafka, which you can think about as a streaming storage. It wasn't doing any computing on the streaming data. It was just ingesting it and making it available in sub-second latency for the consumers of it. And the idea about this project that we initially called it ksql and ksqlDB was to provide the easy way. Of course, SQL would be the ideal language for doing processing of data for users to be able to continuously process this data and get insight in real time. So that was the initial kind of conception of the product, and it went on to become one of the main offering of Confluent for stream processing. And around like a little bit over 4.5 years ago, I left Confluent and started Deltastream, which, as you mentioned, we started as a serverless stream processing platform. Think about the cloud native version of ksql that we had, but under the hood, we were using Apache Flink as our compute engine. And the idea was to make stream processing as simple as possible. One of the biggest challenges in stream processing was complexity of operating these platforms, and you need to have a lot of expertise. So the idea was to hide all of the complexity and make it available for broader people, the power of stream processing without having to deal with the complexity of operating the systems.
And I noticed some of the impact that DeltaStream has is it cuts compute costs by 50%, accelerates time to insight, simplifies your stack, and it integrates seamlessly. So those are some of the impacts that you have with your streaming platform. What are some of the other problems that you're solving in today's landscape?
So, of course, as you mentioned, the typical streaming real-time analytics use cases, those are the main bread and butter problems that we started with 4.5 years ago. And the idea was to a lot of time to build those applications and use cases. You needed systems like Apache Spark or Apache Flink, and you had to build these batch pipelines and run them in cadences like every 10 minutes, every 1 hour, every night, and a lot of complexity. So first and foremost, we wanted to reduce the complexity and also reduce the latency of running these
Mm.
pipelines. So Deltastream is a very kind of like you can think about it as an ideal platform to build these pipelines that ingest data from different sources like Kafka, CDCA, S3 buckets, for instance, continuously, and do transformations, aggregations, joins, all of these compute variety of operations that we can consider, and prepare data for downstream applications. And with that, it significantly simplified not just the operations of these things, but also cost and latency, as you mentioned. Cost and compared to other alternatives that you want run on batch, and large companies provide these type of platforms, but the compute cost is much, much higher on those platforms. And of course, latency. The moment that you go
Mm.
to batch every 1 minute, every 10 minutes, you add that latency to your data, meaning that something happening in the source of the data, think about a transaction in the banking system or an event in IoT system, it would take the time that you add that latency to have it going to the downstream application and getting the insight and taking action for it. So with this, you reduce latency, you reduce the cost, of course, and you significantly simplify it because it's the cloud serverless system that you don't have to deal with the operations of.
I also heard you talk about your real-time native data streaming inside of Snowflake. So that's part of the impact that you're talking about, right?
So that's actually we are also announcing a Databricks version of that. So
Ah,
the
okay.
idea was that yes, so we do have native integration with these systems. A lot of companies use either Databricks or Snowflake or both of them, and of course we do have our own platform. But users are familiar with those UIs and workspaces. So what we have done is that we bring Deltastream inside those workspaces. So let's use Snowflake as an example. It works the same way for Databricks. If you are in the Snowflake workspace now with our Delta application inside Snowflake, users of Snowflake can literally have visibility, access to their streaming and real-time data without having to build pipelines to bring that data inside the Snowflake and then do any processing. They can directly see all of the Kafka topics that they have, all of the CDC tables that they want to use, build data pipelines, all from inside Snowflake workspace, and bring data inside Snowflake and continue their processing and other operations that they need with the data inside Snowflake, all from one place instead of switching between different applications. And as I mentioned, this week we are announcing the Databricks version of that.
Oh, nice.
And this is one of those things that we believe that we kind of simplify access to real-time data and streaming data by going to places that people already are there instead of having them to come to us.
So thinking about a hot problem that people are facing today, I've heard you say that real-time Gen AI isn't just about faster models, it's about the right architecture. So can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, so of course, there are different components in your Gen AI application. LLMs and models are, you can think about them as the brain of your applications. They're a key component that any decision that you're making is going to be done by your LLM or set of LLMs that you may use. But another key part of these type of applications is data, because your brain cannot make any decision without having the data about to help in making that decision. And this data can have a variety of shapes and forms. Of course, you have your historical data, and models are trained based on those things, and continuously can be improved. That's more like you can think about it as your historical and batch data. But once you are doing inference and you're actually taking model, employing model to solve problems, build applications, that's the place that you need real-time data about what's happening in that environment that you're running your application. Let me give you an example, a couple of examples. Think about you're building a GenAI application for giving real-time recommendation on trading equities. That's one thing that without real-time data, you cannot have such an application. Or think about you're building a security co-pilot to investigate your security incidents or monitor what's happening in your enterprise network. Without real-time data, this is not going to be a functioning app, because you cannot make any decisions, or you cannot look back 1 hour ago or last night's traffic to make some assumptions and take action. You want to take action based on the latest and sub-second latency data that's happening in all your company network, for instance. So you can come up with a good spectrum of use cases that kind of go beyond that normal prompting and just asking a question and getting an answer type situation. These are going more towards proactive or real-time low latency data that needs to be available to make any decision. Otherwise, if it is, let's say, old data, stale data, those decisions are not going to be right decisions too, because there was an example on this to just kind of make it easy to understand for folks is, would you cross the street based on 10 minutes ago's data, or right now what's happening and the cars going through and so forth? So that's a very simple example, but it shows that there is a very big chunk of these use cases that without real-time and low latency data, you won't have any reasonable performance on these applications.
So I also heard you say that you can build a chatbot for an SOC analyst today. You can even give it access to APIs from SIEM tools, EDR platforms, or ticketing systems, but without real-time context, the agent is blind. So that's a serious problem if you're not using real-time data.
Absolutely. And real-time data, let's talk about agents. That is kind of a buzzword these days. Technically, they're applications that you're building for different use cases that they are using LLMs as their brain, as we discussed, but they also need senses. They need nerves to kind of understand what's happening around them. And that's the part that we kind of position Deltastream as the real-time context engine for your GenAI agents, meaning that there's a good set of agents that, as you mentioned, they need real-time context. They need to understand what's happening right now, because the decisions that they're going to make using LLMs is going to be based on the reflection of what is happening right now. They cannot kind of use 10 minutes ago or 1 hour ago's snapshot of the environment to make a decision right now. So for those type of scenarios, which are increasingly more and more use cases that we are seeing, you can use Deltastream as the provider of that real-time context. And the way that it would work is that, think about Deltastream, as we discussed before, a unified streaming and batch platform in one system. We can ingest data from a variety of sources in real time, correlate, aggregate, transform, and prepare a real-time context that is continuously updated using these compute pipelines that you build in Deltastream. And once you build this context, which under the hood actually is a real-time materialized view powered by ClickHouse. You will be able to expose this to your agents with Deltastream's built-in MCP server. You don't need to do anything. It is already exposed, and based on the role that agent is going to use to access this data, it also has built-in governance and access control in it. So once you build this real-time context, anytime your agent wants to make a decision, they have the real-time view of what's happening and make the decision based on that, which is very easy to kind of like understand if you think about the same decisions that humans make. As I mentioned, think about like your security co-pilot. You want to make a decision. You want to make sure that you understand exactly what's happening, each IP address, each network flow that you have, each incident that is happening right now. You don't want to make a decision based on 10 minutes flow. And DeltaStream is a platform that you can easily build all of these complex contexts in one place with governance and access control and make it available to not just one agent, but across your agentic system, and significantly simplifies and of course improves the robustness and performance of these systems, because many of these systems, as you know, MCPs, one of the kind of like the common ways for these agents to access data. As the sources of data increase, you don't want to have an agent accessing 20 different services and pulling data from them in runtime. Some of them may not be as fast as needed. It can introduce a lot of delay. Governance is going to be a nightmare as these things become more and more complex. But with real-time context, you kind of like build that context once and make it available with the governance included.
So DeltaStream can be pretty much a single tool for all of that, right?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, you can think about DeltaStream as that nervous system that would kind of sense the environment, and based on what's happening right now, would use the brain, which is LLM, to make a decision and take action. So Delta, of course, building this context, if you want to deploy these systems yourself, it's going to be a lot of complexity, operational complexity, of course, governance and access control and all of those things. These are all built into DeltaStream. So with few secure statements, you can build several pipelines that feed a real-time context and make that context available for your agents.
So I know we talked a lot about a lot of different use cases and everything. Who would be an ideal prospect for your service?
Uh, Pretty much every sector and vertical you can think about, they do have, of course, data requirements, and the real-time data is becoming more and more uh, kind of like required, especially in the age of AI. So I would say we are pretty much agnostic for the vertical. You can think about that similar to any data company like Snowflake, Databricks, or Confluent, and you can see that they have customers and users from every sector, especially financial services and fintech, or IoT, or retail, and uh, hospitality. A lot of these platforms or verticals, they do have real-time use cases, and with the age of AI, the number of these real-time usages are exponentially growing. A lot of use cases that you wouldn't think about them before, now that you have the intelligence, and if you combine that with the fresh data, you can build a lot of interesting applications and systems.
So how would you like people to learn about your company, get in touch with you, and learn more?
Of course, we have a lot of interesting content, blogs and videos in our website. That would be a very good first step to kind of like be familiar with what DeltaStream does and how they can use our platform. And of course, we do have free trial to have people to try it out. And most of these use cases that we have in our content side, like in blogs and videos, we do have full code for that people can go and try themselves.
Hmm.
And of course, once the time comes to build applications, especially imagine building agents that require real-time context, just reach us and we can help you to build those in a very short time and very effective way instead of having you to spend a lot of time figuring it out yourself.
Awesome. Well, Hojjat, this has been really exciting learning about DeltaStream and your amazing solution. So I look forward to staying in touch, watching the company grow, and seeing more and more adoption.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Hojjat.